For the 12 weeks prior to Perth Marathon, I followed the Norwegian Singles Approach, but I did adjust it. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down exactly how I adjusted NSA for marathon prep, what worked, what I'll do differently next time, how I fitted it around my strength training, how I feel the taper went, and how all of that led to the best race of my life. But why did I change it in the first place? It was working so well. Those first 6 weeks when I started NSA, I made incredible progress. So why change something that's working? And the short answer to that is the marathon needs to be respected. It's a bit of a beast. It is a long way. And the only way to develop the physiological resilience and muscular endurance necessary to execute a marathon well is just to get out there and get the work done, to do those big long runs, which the standard NSA format doesn't provide. If you're not familiar with the Norwegian Singles Approach, it's just a way of getting a relatively high volume of sub-threshold work done during the week, whilst not burning out. So the idea is that it's very sustainable. So the week is very simple. You've got 3 sub-threshold workouts and the rest of it is easy. And I followed that format for the first 4, maybe 6 weeks before I started getting more specific for the marathon. Now before NSA, my training was classic boom or bust. Big build, get injured, repeat. But this time I focused on consistency. Now if I come to my calendar view here, I started it on July the 18th. This is my first ever NSA session. It was a 10 by 3 minutes. So I got that one done. And then here's what my long runs looked like at the start. They were just 2 hours easy. So I added 10 minutes per week to every long run. And this is how they started, just easy pace the whole way. So no intensity, no intervals in there at all. The following week, standard NSA format, I had 3 by 12 minutes, 5 by 6.5, and then 10 by 3 with just easy running in between, 50 minutes easy. And then again, the same long run on the weekend, except I added 10 minutes. The following week's the same. I've got the 3 sub-threshold sessions, another 10 minutes for that long run on the weekend, but still no intensity. But then the following week, starting on August the 4th, this is where I started to get a bit more specific for the marathon. So you can see this first sub-threshold session is 3 by 17 minutes now. Now that was done at marathon pace. So that was one of the adjustments I made. And then going into, this was a testing week. A lot of people have asked how I taper for tests, and the answer is I don't taper a huge amount. So you can see the Friday, which is the day before I do an all-out 5K, instead of 10 by 3, I did 8 by 3. So it was a bit of a taper. Now, having gone through that whole block, as fatigue was building as the block went on, I will taper more in future. I'll probably skip that session before the race or the fitness test. But at this stage of the build, I felt that that was fine. I did an all-out 5K the next day and then easy. Now the following week, this is when I actually changed the weekly structure. So instead of 3 sub-threshold sessions during the week and a kind of easy long run on the weekend, I changed it to put one of those sub-threshold interval sessions at the back end of the long run. So I had 2 sub-threshold sessions during the week, and then in my long run, I now started doing intervals at marathon pace. So that actually changed the days of the week that I worked out on as well, because I wanted 2 full days of recovery after that long run, because it is a big training load. So now instead of working out on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, my sessions were on Tuesday and Thursday in order to give me a bit more recovery time after those big long runs. This is how I progressed the long run. So they started off all easy. I started building it probably 16 weeks prior to race day, just adding 10 minutes of easy per week. And then 8 weeks out, this is when I started adding not only those 3 by 17 minutes at marathon pace at the end, but also a big section of steady running. So the runs looked like this: 10 minutes easy warm up, and then the next one was an hour and a half steady. So this was 4 minutes 47 per K. And then of course those intervals. And I continued to build this in the same way. I was adding 10 minutes every week, and those 10 minutes were added to this steady portion. Now at this point, I did notice that these are big runs and they take a lot out of me. And I started to think, Is this really necessary? Because they are big runs. If we have a look at the training stress of those runs, you can see here just the extra load of these long runs. Once I started doing those two things, having that big steady portion and then inserting the 3x17 minutes at marathon pace, it was a big load, and in hindsight, those runs took a lot out of me. Now going forward, I would be really interested to see what would have happened if I didn't have such big long runs. If either I didn't do that first bit steady, if I just did easy and then 3x17 minutes, or if I took those intervals and just put them during the week like I normally would. So have 3 sub-threshold workouts and then keep that weekend long run just at an easy pace. I'd be very interested to see the difference that would have made. If you've been following the block, you'll know that probably around 4 to 6 weeks out from race day, things started to fall apart a little bit. I started to really struggle in workouts. Nothing really felt right. I felt like I was getting slower. At the time, I didn't think that was due to fatigue because, you don't really notice fatigue creeping up. It just creeps up. But looking back and also looking at this training block now, I think fatigue was masking my fitness. If we look at the weeks leading up to race day, we can see quite a few all-out efforts and races, as well as some pretty big sessions. So going back to the 6th of September, I've got 2 all-out efforts, the 3-minute and 12-minute critical power test. Then the following week, I did 3 sub-threshold sessions instead of 2, and then a big 38K long run on the weekend with a very high running stress score. Following week, normal sessions during the week, but then a 10K race on the weekend, so another all-out session. And it wasn't just any all-out session. I had to go really deep into the pain cave for that one. I messed up the pacing, so this race took a lot out of me, and I should have taken more recovery time. I had 2 days of easy running, and then had the biggest workout of the block, this 5x4K, so another big session. Another session a couple of days later, progression run on the weekend. Then the following week, had a normal session and then another all-out effort. So this is where I was testing my critical power. So we had a 3-minute and a 12-minute all-out test. So you can see a lot of all-out efforts in the weeks leading up to race day that I never really allowed myself to recover properly from, which definitely was masking fatigue. This view here is showing weekly distance. Now, at the start of the build around here, I was doing 76 Ks a week. And then my peak week was 115. So quite a gradual build, nothing crazy. You can see from that graph, we've just got build, 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 test, build, 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 test, build, 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 test, and then a bunch of racing around here. Pretty smooth, pretty gradual. So overall, how well do I think this training block prepared me for the marathon? And it's hard to give any other answer other than exceptionally well. The race went so well, obviously, but also looking at the typical fatigue markers, they tell a story of a guy who was very well prepared, who finished very strong, and he didn't really flag towards the end. So looking at some of these fatigue markers, my ground contact time doesn't drop at all. This is cadence, again, doesn't drop at all. Stride length, I don't think there's any drop there at all. Leg spring stiffness, there's a small drop, but certainly nothing huge. And in my footpath data, this dotted line is the final 10K, the solid line is the first 10K. It appears that I actually got stronger and improved my form as the race went on. So overall, I couldn't be happier, and clearly what I did helped. The only question I have is, could I get away with doing less? I would be interested to try a different approach with that long run and just keep it at an easy pace, but stick with the 3 sub-threshold sessions during the week. So maybe on the next block, I'll try that out. The taper seemed to work really well, although it did feel like I was cutting it fine. Right up until the day before, I did not feel good at all. Fortunately, it all came together on the day, and there are lots of factors at play there. But I think the taper was pretty good. I was really happy with the level of intensity there. Like on race day, I felt like I had the right amount of muscle tension, of spring, of pop, and I felt recovered. So I think the taper was pretty good, and I probably won't tweak it too much going forward. With the strength training, I do think that helped. Now, obviously, it's really hard to quantify because unless I live the same life twice, one with, one without the strength, you just will never know. And yes, I was doing far more than necessary, but I enjoy strength training. And you know what? I could hold my torso upright at the end of the race, which is more than can be said than a lot of marathoners. But as I said, I enjoy it. I know the upper body weight doesn't help me at all. In fact, it's got the opposite effect. But I feel like if I'm going to cut weight, I should definitely focus on fat before muscle. So I'm going to continue strength training. So I hope that was helpful to hear how I adjusted the Norwegian Singles Approach to prepare for a marathon. But I've got a very special video coming. I've got Andy Rayner, the FOD runner, coming on the channel to talk about the same thing, how he adjusted Norwegian Singles to prepare for his marathon. But also, we've got the Godfather himself, James Copeland, is going to come on as well and talk about the same thing. So all three of us are going to sit down. We're going to talk about what we changed about NSA for the marathon, what worked and what we'll do differently in future. It is going to be a banging episode. I can't wait. We're going to learn so much. So make sure you are subscribed. That is going to be a very cool video. Thank you for watching and I will see you then.